Since 2001, the Broadcasting Board of Governors has recognized excellence in journalism with the David Burke Distinguished Journalism Awards. Named for the first chairman of the board and former president of CBS News, as well as vice president and executive vice president of ABC News, David Burke embodied journalistic integrity. Each year, brave men and women from the networks of the U.S. Agency for Global Media are honored for their exceptional courage, integrity, and professionalism.
For the people around the world in countries that don't enjoy the same liberties or freedom of speech as the United States, we are considered the bastion of journalism.
This award reinforces our compromise in order to provide free information to the countries like Cuba.
I'm very grateful to receive this honor. I'm very grateful to the continued support from colleagues and RFA leaders and the BBG, and thank you very much.
We would like to thank you for this award.
This is a high appraisal of our work.
It supports and inspires us.
It will help us carry out Radio Liberty's mission with dignity and professionalism.
Because Crimeans have the right to know.
Thank you.
And now, from Washington, D.C., the David Burke Distinguished Journalism Awards.
Good morning, and welcome to the 17th Annual David R. Burke Distinguished Journalism Awards. Today, I have the honor of being your host as we celebrate the brave men and women of our networks, Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Radio Free Asia, the Office of Cuba Broadcasting, and the Middle East Broadcasting Networks. I'd like to thank all of you for coming today. I'd also want to welcome everyone who's watching online. A video of today's ceremony will be available on usagm.gov, so you can watch it again or share it with family and friends. The journalists we honor today are some of the best in media, and they work in some of the most dangerous places in the world. So I believe it's fitting to mention that yesterday, Time magazine chose journalists fighting against a war on truth as its Person of the Year for 2018. Time magazine calls the murdered Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi, the slain staffers of the Capital Gazette in Annapolis, Maryland, and others guardians on the frontline battle against the manipulation of truth and the abuse of power. For just doing their jobs, reporting the facts, these journalists and many more like them wore targets on their back, and some, including Khashoggi, paid the ultimate price. Yet the risks they take and the passion in which they take those risks inspire me. And I've always said that about people who make up the U.S. Agency for Global Media and our networks. You all inspire me every day, as you do our board. The Burke Awards recognize courage, integrity, and high-quality, professional, independent journalism, things I see on display every day at this agency. I do not envy the network leadership in their task of choosing just one winner this year. Indeed, so many of you display the qualities this award champions. So as we recognize the work of these amazing men and women, I consider this a celebration of everyone's great work. None of us operates in a vacuum. Every one of you enriches this agency with the stories you tell and the stories you live. Together, the U.S. AGM family informs, engages, and connects people around the world in support of freedom and democracy. And we're impacting the lives of more people than ever in our history. Just this last year, our total global audience, weekly audience, grew by 67 million, from 278 million to 345 million. That's no small feat, and is credit to all of the reporters, journalists, technicians, and support staff of the USAGM. Before we begin handing out the awards, I have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker, Mr. Robert McMahon. Robert has covered foreign affairs since 1990 for the Associated Press, Radio Free Europe, and CFR.org. As managing editor of the Council on Foreign Relations website, Robert oversees publishing of daily news-related content, supervising an editorial team that produces everything from backgrounders to long-form interactives. He also contributes analysis and background reporting and co-hosts the weekly podcast series, The World Next Week. Under his guidance, the CFR.org website has garnered multiple media citations, including Emmys, Overseas Press Club Awards, and SPJ Awards, a Webby, and an Online News Association Awards. Please join me in welcoming Robert McMahon.
Well, thank you, John. And good morning and good afternoon to those in Prague, I believe. It is my great pleasure and privilege to be sharing some comments with you on the occasion of the Burke Awards. I have been a lifelong journalist and foreign policy obsessive, and more than 12 years of my career has been with Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. And it's been really gratifying to see the arc of the U.S. international broadcasters, and actually beyond broadcasting, right? But the arc of these services and what they do, and the breadth of what they cover. And this is being honored today, obviously, with truly important reporting on places that are leading the news virtually every day: Turkey, Burma, Myanmar, Syria, Cuba, and so forth, Kyrgyzstan, and I think back to the period when I joined Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty in the early '90s, and it feels like a different planet. It was starting with the fact that it was an organization that was on a bit of a role, having felt like it took part in the collapse of the Soviet bloc and in the fall of the Berlin Wall. But on the media side, it also an entirely different set of circumstances, obviously. It was still producing, by and large, its main channel for dissemination was sort of increasingly scratchy shortwave. And contrast that now with so many ways you disseminate information. It's sort of astonishing to think about. But there are things that I learned in those days. It was state of the art in that time period. And there were things I learned at Radio Free Europe's newsroom that have stuck with me through my career, and I think that have sort of been a mark of the excellence that I think you all share in your work. And part of that was just an absolute attention to fact-checking. I mean, there was a large clip file. Again, it seems anachronistic to talk about this. There was a large clip file they had at Radio Free Europe. It was expected you would talk to the broadcast services if you had questions about a piece you were writing, or the research institute that was attached to Radio Free Europe. And by the time you were putting content out on a newswire, it was fairly rock-ribbed. It felt very thorough. And it was an approach, I think, that served not only the radio as well. I think it served a lot of the journalists who came through those years very well. Myself, I was fortunate enough to move along to Prague and help rebuild the newsroom, navigate the Balkan Wars, several series of them, then ended up in the United Nations, among other things, covering the run-up to the Iraq War and all of the back and forth in the UN Security Council. It was, again, there was a commitment to the truth. There was a commitment to sort of what I would call mission journalism. But at the end of the day, it's really journalism at its core. I would say the other thing that I also took with me from that period was the passion and the real talent of journalists from the region. I was fortunate enough to encounter many of them, especially in the Prague days. And I have seen now, as a consumer, not a contributor to U.S.-funded broadcasters, I've seen that work continue. I would say that we're in a moment now, as Judge John referenced, to sort of the best of times, worst of times for journalism. It's incredibly exciting to be involved in the quest for truth, to carry out investigative journalism, and it's especially, I think. It's especially rewarding because of the platforms you're able to disseminate, but also the fact that you're not sort of siloing off your information. It can be shared in the United States. It can be shared around the world, as we saw with some of the work of the Kyrgyz journalist. These are values, and these are this is work that you're creating that has a worldwide value. So I applaud those who are being honored today. I think it's very much in the tradition of the journalism that I saw being committed and produced at Radio Free Europe, and that I value as a gatekeeper myself now at the Council on Foreign Relations website, where when I see reports from your various agencies, there's sort of a brand approval that is noticed, and it's and whether it's our own sort of newsletters or other reports that we link to from yours, or I see it on aggregator sites that I go to, trying to follow what's going on, Asia, Central Europe, whatever. I think you should be really proud that you've raised it to such a level that you are among the sort of established, credible journalistic sources that are out there in a time of great noise and confusion. I think about, again, back to those early days in Prague when there was a very memorable essay that the great Czech film director Miloš Forman wrote, where he talked about what was happening in Eastern Europe at the time and throughout the former Soviet bloc in terms of leaving the totalitarian zoo and going into the jungle. And he was celebrating the fact that the zoo was closing, that the repressive atmosphere that so many lived under was over. But he also warned, if I recall it correctly, there was a warning there about a number of people maybe not wanting to venture out, that the jungle of freedom was a little bit too scary. And I think that's something that continues to resonate today. If you look at the media landscape, you look at what you're all dealing with in terms of information warfare on top of just doing your daily jobs, it is a jungle. But there is a guardian role, again, to cite what John mentioned in the Time magazine announcement this week. There's a guardian role, and I think you follow through in that tradition and are very much in the ranks of the guardians that are being honored on the cover of Time. So I just want to pass along, I think there are bedrock journalism values that transcend almost a generation of at least my association with the U.S.-funded broadcasters, and I want to honor those who are going to be receiving those awards today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Nicely done. So moving on now. It's time to get started. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the director of the Voice of America, Amanda Bennett.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here. And first, I'd like to, in advance, congratulate all my colleagues who will be stepping up here to honor their own journalists too. But my job here, which I'm very pleased to do, is to recognize our Turkish service for their courageous reporting. And as John mentioned, what better and more appropriate time for us to be thinking about this, to be thinking about the courage that it takes to be a journalist in this environment these days. And this is far from the only incident of it, but I'd like to just single out one thing specifically to talk about, which was the service's coverage of the protest that turned violent outside the Turkish ambassador's residence. It was during the Turkish President Erdogan's visit to Washington, and while everyone else was looking somewhere else, our journalists were right there on the scene. And when the Turkish security forces right here in Washington attacked peaceful protesters outside the residence, and the U.S. police, even they called it a brutal attack, our Turkish service was there. And if you look at the video that was captured, the exclusive footage that went all around the world, you need to think about the person holding that camera and where he kept himself vis-a-vis those attacks in that moment, and what kind of courage it took to stand there and keep on filming. And thanks to that person and the Turkish service and everyone else involved in the Turkish service, that video was seen on Turkish outlets, U.S. outlets, international outlets, and their reporting showed not just how Turkish authorities treated dissent, but also to show the other half of it, which is how important the freedom of expression and rule of law is. So it also showed the world what we at VOA already know, which is that VOA's Turkish service, under the leadership of Chief Hülya Polat, is an exceptional team of hardworking journalists, and they are dedicated to reporting the truth. The Turkish service is one of our very, very oldest services. It began broadcasting in 1942, and it's known throughout the region for its unbiased and accurate news and information about local, regional, international news, and it appears in leading Turkish television networks and online. And just like that brave cameraman who faced the personal risk, other of VOA's reporters also face personal risks in covering the news there and in their coverage of the Erdogan government after these reports were published. As you well know, Turkey ranks among the worst offenders in the world in the way it treats journalists. It has more journalists in prison than any other country. And it is in this context that VOA Turkish service journalists have risked their physical safety and their own well-being to do their jobs. I'd like to go to the video now so you can see a little example of it.
On May 16, 2017, peaceful protesters gathered outside the Turkish ambassador's residence in Washington, D.C., waiting for Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to arrive. Voice of America's Turkish service was there with cameras rolling when suddenly Erdogan's security forces and other armed individuals brutally attacked the protesters. The video, which is difficult to watch, appeared to show Erdogan's bodyguards hitting and kicking protesters and pulling out guns as D.C. police tried to intervene. 11 people were injured, including one critically. The video also caught President Erdogan looking on. Thanks to their professionalism and dedication, VOA Turkish journalists continued recording even as the violence erupted around them. They risked physical harm on that day and faced continued harassment afterwards as a result of their reporting. Their footage of the brawl went viral as national and international news outlets, including CNN, Reuters, NBC, CBS, ABC, and the BBC, used it in their reporting of Erdogan's visit to Washington. Coverage of these events provided video evidence to audiences in Turkey and elsewhere of the kind of violence and suppression the Erdogan government uses against its opponents, even in other countries. It also revealed for foreign audiences the value of free speech in American democracy. From Senator John McCain,
but I'm still outraged at this Turkish beating these, that we should throw their ambassador the hell out of the United States of America.
And State Department spokesman Heather Nauert.
The charges filed against 12 Turkish security officials send a clear message that the United States does not tolerate individuals who use intimidation and violence to stifle freedom of speech and legitimate political expression.
The footage also provided a demonstration of the U.S.'s commitment to the rule of law. With the help of VOA's reporting, the FBI investigated the incident, and 19 people, 15 of whom were identified as Turkish security officials, were later indicted by a grand jury. This is a powerful example of the impact journalism can have. VOA's Turkish service not only reported the news, they also demonstrated a commitment to free speech, democratic values, and the free exchange of ideas. And for that, they are this year's VOA Burke Award winners.
I don't know about you, but I found that video very difficult to watch. But let me just tell you one thing. How much more difficult would it have been if that had happened on our soil here in Washington, D.C., and nobody had seen it? So I'd like to introduce our Bureau Chief Hülya Polat to come up here and accept the award on behalf of her staff.
I have to admit that I am not ready for this to make a speech, but I have to share with you some of my thoughts of this video. And I would like to thank all the team members of the Turkish service. I mean, one person is nothing, but a team is everything. And I have the best team ever, and I'm the luckiest person at VOA right now. I feel that way. Tezcan Taşkıran, I'll name some people. Tezcan Taşkıran, the cameraman who was there, Üzeyir Yanar, and Mehmet Toroğlu and Mehmet Sümer, who were there at the scene and made this video available to all outlets in Europe, in Turkey, in the United States. I think it is a first for VOA to have shared a video with all these outlets and inform the Turkish public about what happened here in Washington, D.C. And of course, what happened afterwards is even more important to show the Turkish public and the Turkish officials that they cannot get away with violations of freedom of expression and freedom of press. It is a challenging time for us. The world has changed for the worse. There are more conflicts. There are more disagreements. There is a lot of violation of human rights and press freedoms. So it is not easy for us to cover everything related to Turkey, but that's what we are doing right now. I would like to thank the VOA management and BBG, of course, for empowering the Turkish service with the right resources and moral support so that we can do what we are doing today. Without the resources, without the right team, you cannot accomplish anything. And Turkish service has always been under the axe of cutbacks, cuts. We have all lived through difficult times, but I am very happy to see what has happened today. And I would also like to thank Amanda, Sandy, John, and everybody who has supported us so far. Also, I would like to thank Taçlan Suerdem, the former service chief, our former division chief, Ismail Dayat, and Alan Heil, who is here today, and everybody who has come today to join us to celebrate this major award. I mean, I can't be more proud of my team. I can't even say what I really think. I'm so excited and so emotional. But of course, my thanks go to Ekber Ayazi, our current division chief, and our the program manager, Eric Phillips, and of course, Kelo, who is back there, which is really, really great to see all of you. And among all these distinguished guests and my colleagues, I cannot really express my words. But of course, I would like to thank my family too, my husband and my children, who have accepted the fact that VOA comes first over the years. And it's like an Oscar speech, but they deserve a thank you because they have supported me all the way along. And I am very proud of what my family turned out today. I am an example of a woman who who have been able to balance work and family, given the support from VOA. I would like to end with what Eleanor Roosevelt said once: a woman is like a tea bag. once you put her in hot water, she'll work out miracles. It will turn out the best tea. I mean, I really support the female colleagues at VOA who have been empowered today. And we are on the way of really being recognized. I really thank all of you. I feel very proud of being part of VOA. I mean, this is a great, great institution, organization, and I will never forget the days I had here. It is an amazing job that I have seen that everybody is doing here. Journalism needs integrity, professionalism, and teamwork. And in the Turkish service, that's what we are emphasizing now. And I am grateful that we have gotten the David Burke Award. Thank you all so very much.
Well done. Well done. So, the next David Burke Award is a posthumous one. It goes to Kyrgyz service reporter Ulanbek Egizbaev. He was an incredible journalist whose life was lost too soon, but whose light continues to shine. Last week, I was in Prague visiting RFERL, and I had the honor of presenting the Burke Award plaque in person to the Kyrgyz service. To help recognize Ulanbek's work today, I'm joined by newly appointed acting president, speaking of women power, Daisy Sindelar, who's joining us now live from Prague. Daisy, take it away.
Thanks, John. Good morning, everybody. And I wanted to say what a delight it is to have an RFERL veteran as your keynote speaker, especially one of Bob's caliber. So, hi, Bob. Of course, this is a very bittersweet occasion for us at RFERL. It's been a tough season overall to lose a fellow journalist. I wanted to say that there are a lot of different types of journalists. There are the hardened investigative reporters who seek the truth, holding the rich and powerful to account. Then there are the bread and butter journalists who chronicle the ordinary side of daily life and give voice to the voiceless. And finally, there are the storytellers, the correspondents whose keen poetic gifts lift their work into the realm of art. I think those of us who have worked as journalists will tend to categorize ourselves as one type or the other, but our colleague from the Kyrgyz service, Ulanbek Egizbaev, was all of these. Armed with just a notebook and a camera, he could expose a corrupt politician one day, only to turn around the next and beautifully capture the daily lives and struggles of ordinary, everyday citizens in his native Kyrgyzstan. His enthusiasm, tenacity, and genuine concern for people was contagious, and those of us who were privileged enough to work with him are all the better for it. Ulanbek was not only a great journalist, he was also a role model. We honor him today not because he's gone, but because the caliber of the work that he produced and the care and compassion he always demonstrated will be his lasting legacy and a standard that the rest of us will always aspire to. Many of his colleagues in the Kyrgyz service, when they're struggling over a lead or a particularly complicated story, will still ask themselves, what would Ulanbek do? None of us knows how much time is allotted to us in this life, but there's one thing that my RFERL colleagues and I know for sure, and that's that few of us will accomplish as much for our communities and countries as Ulanbek did for his in his very short life. It's my hope that his stories are going to live on and that many generations of future journalists will continue to look to him for inspiration. Thank you very much, and we're going to take a look at his video now.
At just 28, Ulanbek Egizbaev was one of the brightest investigative journalists in Kyrgyzstan. His persistent investigations and passion for untold stories made him a rising star at Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty's Kyrgyz service. Ulanbek was a dogged investigative journalist. According to RFVRL Kyrgyz service director Venera Jumatayeva, he had become the biggest threat to all corrupt politicians in Kyrgyzstan. Ulanbek reported on corruption cases in the government, the customs service, various ministries, public land distribution offices, and even a major corruption scheme on cemeteries. These investigations had a major impact on Kyrgyz society and prompted the Prosecutor General to investigate the high-level corruption that led to these cases. Ulanbek also dedicated his life to being a voice for those who could not speak up for themselves. He reported regularly and passionately about unsung heroes, be it a teacher in a desolate mountain village, a young woman overcoming the consequences of a botched operation, or a young disabled teenager staying optimistic despite difficult challenges in his life. For this last story, Ulanbek and RFVRL video producer Mykola Nemchenko won a 2016 Webby People's Voice Award and traveled to New York to accept the prize.
Everyone can dream and win.
But in July 2018, while on vacation, Ulanbek unexpectedly passed away. His death prompted an outpouring of grief across Kyrgyzstan. One subscriber to RFVRL Central Asia Newswire wrote that his passing was a huge loss, not only for Kyrgyz journalism, but for the entire Kyrgyz nation. People from across the country came to his funeral, and RFVRL received letters of condolences from President Jierbenkov and Prime Minister Abulgaziev. Former Kyrgyz President Rosa Otunbayeva even pledged about $15,000 of her pension toward the creation of an investigative journalism foundation devoted to Ulanbek's legacy. Ulanbek is survived by his wife, who is expecting their first child. His dedication and passion were true assets to his country, and for that, Ulanbek Egizbaev is RFVRL's Burke Award winner.
Thank you very much. And to accept the award on Ulanbek's behalf, we're now going to hear from his friend and colleague in RFVRL's bureau in Bishkek, the capital of Kyrgyzstan. That's Aizada Kasmailova.
Dear board members, colleagues, friends, Ulanbek Egizbaev died very young. He was only 28 years old. Yet, he still was able to establish himself as a brand name in Kyrgyzstan for Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty's Kyrgyz service. Ulanbek was a very brave, honest, and sharp investigative journalist who did so much work and made an incredible contribution to Kyrgyz journalism in general. People today say he was a symbol of honest and brave journalism, and Ulanbek is even being praised for raising the quality of the Kyrgyz media to a much higher level. We are all very proud to have worked with him, helping him to become a real hero in his homeland. We thank you very much for this special recognition and the respect it shows for the great work he did during his short but wonderful time on this earth.
Thank you, Daisy.
Thank you.
All right. Now, moving on, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the Director of the Office of Cuba Broadcasting, Mr. Tomas Regalado. Tomas?
Thank you, John. Good morning. Let me tell you about Cuba and the work that OCB does. Cuba has the most repressive media environment in the Western Hemisphere, and we have many countries that do that. The government owns and controls all traditional news media, and uses these outlets to promote the political goals and deny a voice for the opposition and the civic society. While freedom of the press and freedom of expression has suffered under 60 years, it will be in January 1st, 2019, 60 years of Castro regime, the longest in the history of the Western Hemisphere. The brave journalists who work for and contribute to Radio and TV Marti are breaking through. It takes persistent enthusiasm and determination to report the news for audiences in Cuba. OCB winner this year personifies this characteristic. I invite you to see the video.
For most Cubans, access to accurate and unbiased information about local and international news is hard to come by. State-owned media, severe restrictions on independent journalists, and rampant censorship all contribute to a tightly controlled information environment. But Rodolfo Hernandez, video journalist for the Office of Cuba Broadcasting, has gone above and beyond his duties to get important stories to audiences in Cuba. He has traveled to Central and South America to cover significant political and humanitarian stories. In Nicaragua, his reporting on the political demonstrations and government violence kept Cubans informed on the uprising there. He also traveled to Colombia to report on the humanitarian crisis at the border, where desperate Venezuelans sought relief from their country's economic turmoil. Rodolfo has long been recognized as a proactive video journalist, covering many top stories for OCB, including the opening of the Cuban embassy in Washington, D.C., the U.S. presidential election, Pope Benedict's visit to the White House, and the migration of Cubans trying to escape to the United States. Born in Cienfuegos, he studied photojournalism in Havana before escaping from Cuba to work in Miami. He worked for several media outlets and was awarded 2 regional Emmy Awards before joining the Office of Cuba Broadcasting in 2008. Since then, his unwavering dedication to keeping Cubans informed has been an inspiration to all who work with him. For his passion, skill, and commitment to excellence, Rodolfo Hernandez is this year's Office of Cuba Broadcasting Burke Award winner.
I'd like to point out that Radio and TV Marti were the only source of information for the Cuban people about the riots in Nicaragua. The Cuban official press was silent. During 10 days, they did not mention anything at all. And the only way to be informed about the riots and the killings in Nicaragua was Radio and TV Marti. Ladies and gentlemen, Rodolfo Hernandez.
Thank you. Today, I want to dedicate this award to all journalists, reporters, technicians, cameramen, and editors who risked their life life in everywhere to bring us the truth. Also, I want to share this award with my colleagues at Radio and Television Marti for working together and honestly on a daily basis to make this world a more just, free, and democratic place, especially to my co-worker and friends, Tomás Regalado Jr. and Ricardo Quintana. With humility, I thank God for everything and my family, especially my wife, for all of this year of unconditional support. Thank you very much.
It's now my pleasure to introduce the president of Radio Free Asia, Miss Libby Liu. Libby?
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody, for being here to honor the courage of our reporters. Today, the Radio Free Asia journalist who is earning this award embodies Radio Free Asia values. He is a person of extraordinary courage, intuition, sensitivity, dedication, and sacrifice. Kantar does his reporting in the Shan state of Myanmar. By now, the world is aware of the tactics and the brutal repression of the junta military in Myanmar, particularly against the ethnic minorities in that country. His jurisdiction is the Shan state, which is home to 5.6 million people who are living in the grips of decades-long violent conflict with this very military. The Shan state is remote, it is rugged, and it is very dangerous, but it makes up a quarter of the ground in Myanmar and is responsible for 90% of the opium and methamphetamine production in that country. Kantar does this every day. He rides his motorcycle from village to village to report on religious violence, ethnic conflict, drug abuse, human trafficking, and all the worst things that are happening there. In October, he produced an in-depth investigative series on drug abuse and human trafficking near the Golden Triangle in Myanmar. And he has focused much of his reporting on the unrelenting fight between the Myanmar's military and the various multiple armed ethnic armies in Shan state. He reports on these conflicts, especially on the human toll of the unarmed civilians that are caught in the middle. More than that, he's got a profound intuition for news. You know, sometimes you just have those reporters that know there's going to be a story when nobody else sees it. One day, earlier last year, he was in a local government office interviewing somebody when an argument broke out between a militia leader and a soldier. Because of his intuition, he followed them out on the street and filming, and what he caught on tape was truly shocking. In rage, the militia leader got in his car and ran down the soldier, putting him in hospital. He later, of course, then threatened Kantar not to do the report, but Kantar does not back down. He doesn't let fear get in the way of reporting. In 2016, he and a bunch of other reporters arrived on the scene of the militia, junta, the Burmese military, murdering 5 Shan villagers. Even though he was not the only reporter in the group, he was the only one that reported it. You know, I still think about this every time I read an analysis on Myanmar where they give an obligatory shout out to the one time the government persecuted military officers for murdering civilians, and it was based on this report. So it's that courage and that dedication and professionalism that makes us so proud and inspires us every day to do more and be more in service of our audiences. So let's watch the video, and thank you so much again for this recognition.
Reporting from Myanmar does not come easily, and reporting from Shan State, a remote, rugged, and dangerous area that makes up a quarter of the country, is even harder. But that's exactly what Radio Free Asia journalist Thar does every day. On his motorcycle, he rides from village to village, reporting on religious violence, ethnic conflict, drug abuse, trafficking, and more. In October, he produced an in-depth and insightful report on drug abuse and trafficking near the infamous Golden Triangle. He has also focused much of his reporting on the unrelenting fight between Myanmar's military and a number of different ethnic armies. And in the midst of those conflicts, he has told the stories of unarmed civilians caught in the middle. Thar also has an intuitive awareness of news, sometimes even before it happens. One day, he was in a local government office when an argument broke out between a militia leader and a soldier. Sensing the dispute wasn't over when they left, Thar followed them out, and what he caught on tape was shocking. In an act of rage, the military leader purposefully hit the other man as he walked down the street. He then later threatened Thar for reporting the story. But Thar doesn't back down, and he doesn't let fear get in the way of reporting the truth. In 2016, he and other reporters arrived at the scene of a murder of 5 Shan villagers committed by members of the Myanmar military. Although he wasn't the only reporter there, he was the only one brave enough to file the report. Because of his courage, the story got out, but more important, military members involved in the massacre, for once, were tried and punished. It is because of this impact and his courage, dedication, and professionalism that Thar is this year's RFA Burke Award winner.
So he's here from Burma. I'm going to invite Jojo Ong, the Burmese service director, to come in to help translate for Thar.
Thank you. I'm honored to receive this prestigious and important award. I extend my gratitude to all here today and to the USAMG for recognize the great work of my colleagues at the other Nawas too. I will let my director read my thanks speech. Thank you.
Very honored to continue Kanthar's remark. Thank you. I began my career as a journalist just 5 years ago, and in 2015 began working for Radio Free Asia's Burmese service covering Burma's Shan state. The human toll in there is almost unimaginable. Thousands get caught in the crossfire of ethnic conflict, losing their home, their lives, and the lives of their loved ones. Reporters can be charged for unlawful association law by authorities for merely talking to ethnic groups that haven't signed the ceasefire accords. Restrictions on access make it difficult to cover other issues that affect thousands, from displacement to hunger, to human trafficking and slavery, to drug abuse and the narcotics trade. Radio Free Asia, RFA, is the only media that is able to report on those issues on a regular basis, reaching an audience that yearns to know about these issues that deeply affect their lives. I share this honor, which is an inspiration, with my colleagues at Radio Free Asia's Burmese service in Yangon and in Washington, D.C., and our leader, Susan Labries, RFA's director for Southeast Asian Services, who is retiring this year, in fact, today. Thank you again, and thanks to USAGM for supporting free, independent, and objective press in Burma and around the globe. Thank you so much.
Where is Susan? Susan, I believe this is your actual last day, is it not? Would you please stand so we can thank you for your great service? So it's my pleasure to introduce to you the Middle East Broadcasting Network's president, Alberto Hernandez. Alberto?
Thank you, John. Syria was and continues to be one of the most dangerous places in the world for journalists. It's the place where in August 2012, Alhurra television's correspondent Bashar Fahmy was kidnapped and has not been seen since. It's a place where we lacked, obviously, a journalistic presence for many years, and it's something in late 2017 we really wanted to address. And we were able to hire Heybar Othman in December of 2017, based in northeast Syria. And very early on, he became a key part of our news gathering in that area. Within weeks, actually within days of his hiring, he was on the front lines covering events in Afrin when Turkish airstrikes began there. And he continued to report from the front lines of the battle and the situation affecting that area, largely Kurdish inhabited area of northwest Syria. His courageous reporting was one of the few unbiased sources of news available regarding what was happening on the ground in Afrin, on the human rights situation, the economic situation, the situation for women, for minorities, for monuments, and etc. His reporting really provided a first-hand view to what was happening in the daily lives of civilians there. Heybar is a professional, dedicated, and fearless correspondent who is reporting in very difficult circumstances. After Afrin, he continued reporting on the front lines in Manbij and was in a situation where several of his colleagues were detained, non-MBN colleagues, were detained and are still detained in that part of Syria by militias in that area, and he was barely able to escape that situation. He also regularly covers the situation in northern Syria in areas recovered from ISIS, including the ISIS capital of Raqqa, reporting on the victims of the Islamic State and on efforts of reconstruction and similar work being done there. Let's hear something about his work now.
Throughout Syria's grueling civil war, people living in the northern part of the country have seen waves of destruction, turf battles, and oppression. As various groups fight for control, information has become a lifeline for those trapped in the conflict. Despite tremendous personal risk, Alhurra correspondent Heybar Othman has crisscrossed northern Syria to provide a first-hand account of the effects of war there. He has reported on the U.S.-led coalition's operations against ISIS in Raqqa and neighboring provinces, as well as on the impact war has had on daily life, stories that went largely uncovered by local and pan-Arab media outlets. Then, when the Turkish military tried to drive the Kurds from the cities of Afrin and Manbij, Othman was the only reporter from a pan-Arab network to report on the conflict. At great risk to his personal safety, he covered many humanitarian, social, and human rights issues, including the struggles of people taking shelter in caves and getting treated in the hospital, the fears of religious and ethnic minorities, as well as the destruction of churches, temples, and historic sites by both ISIS militants and Turkish airstrikes. In February, he got caught in the crossfire in Afrin. Then a few months later, he narrowly escaped after armed men from a Syrian opposition group attacked him and 4 other journalists. Despite all of this, Othman has reported the facts as they happen, accurately and objectively. His singular contribution to the Arabic media environment is giving voice to the Kurds in northern Syria. Their struggles have been almost invisible in the Arabic media, which is saturated with stories from either a pro-Syrian regime or a Turkey-allied perspective. Because his bravery, integrity, and professionalism have advanced the public interest and ensured Alhurra viewers are accurately informed of the latest events in the war in northern Syria, Heybar Othman is this year's MBN Burke Award winner.
Present to you, and we'll take a picture, and then you have a video channel.
Yes. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to get out of Syria to be with us. Okay. But here's Othman.
مساء الخير زملائي الأعزاء، دم باش بريخ رمشو. أنا هيبار عثمان، مراسل قناة الحرة في شمال شرق سوريا. قبل كل شيء بحب أشكر الوكالة الأمريكية للإعلام الدولي USAGM على منح جائزة ديفيد بيرك لعام 2018. طبعا هاي الجائزة أنا بعتبرها شرف كبير وسام لإلي وحافز جديد في مسيرتي الصحفية والإعلامية لنقل المعلومات والأخبار بصدق وحياد بما يتلائم مع توقعات المشاهد العربي والمشاهد السوري بشكل خاص. بهاي المناسبة بحب أشكر سعادة السفير ألبرتو فرنانديز المدير العام لشبكة الشرق الأوسط للإعلام على الدعم المستمر وعلى الثقة وعلى جهوده في تطوير وتحسين أداء الشبكة. طبعا نجاحي كان بفضل دعم وتعاون زملائي في قناة الحرة. بهاي المناسبة بحب ذكر كمان أنه نحن ب 22 حزيران تعرضنا لكمين من قبل فصائل الجيش السوري الحر في ريف منبج أثناء إعداد تقرير عن الدوريات الأمريكية التركية في المنطقة، وبنتيجة الحادثة تم اعتقال 3 زملاء إعلاميين، لهيك بنتمنى أنه يتم إطلاق سراحهم بأقرب وقت. خلال العام الماضي غطت قناة الحرة معركة عفرين والتطورات العسكرية في منبج، وأيضا الحملة العسكرية ضد مسلحي داعش في الضفاف الشرقية لنهر الفرات. وغطت الحرة الكثير من القصص عن معاناة النازحين في المخيمات، وعرضت الحرة تقارير خاصة عن المفقودين والمعتقلين، وأيضا قصص مأساوية عن ضحايا عنف داعش ضد الأقليات الدينية والقومية. ورح نستمر برسالة شبكة الشرق الأوسط للإعلام المتمثلة بنقل الحقائق والمعلومات بصدق ونزاهة وشجاعة. شكرا كتير.
This is always my favorite day of the year around here, to just witness the incredible inspiration from our journalists around the world and what they represent in terms of all of our journalists and the work we do every day. Let's give one final round of applause to all of our winners, please. Now I'd like to invite our chairman of the Broadcasting Board of Governors, Mr. Ken Weinstein, to have a few words. Ken?
Thank you, John. Look, this is always a very moving day for all of us at USAGM. I want to thank you, John. I want to thank everyone in the USAGM community, and obviously especially the winners of these awards, and everyone who works so tirelessly to carry out our important mission. There are countless talented people in front of and behind the scenes here at the USAGM networks who make this outstanding level of work happen every single day. We all know how dangerous it is become for journalists working in some of the toughest places on the planet to handle their mission, and we've seen what these people have produced, and it's a daily reminder of their accomplishments, I should note, are a daily reminder of the incredible sacrifices that our people out in the field and our people here in Washington make every single day. It can't be overstated how important your work is, getting the truth out to people who don't have access to the truth and who need it most of all. Benefits all of us, and it demonstrates the best ideals of your profession. I know that our audiences around the world depend on us, and thank you greatly for all you do. And all of us here at the USAGM depend on you, and thank you as well. Heartiest congratulations.
Thank you, Chairman Weinstein and CEO Lansing, and thank you to everyone who has come here to help us celebrate, whether in person or online. A recording of today's video will be available on usagm.gov, so please go back and relive the memories and share with your friends and family. If you'd like to learn more about these journalists, we have some full-length interviews with each of the journalists available on our podcast. It's called Reaching the 87%, and you can find that anywhere that you download your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe because these episodes will start rolling out next week. For those of you with friends and family here, if you would like to take some group photos, we're going to keep the stage lit. So we invite you to do that, and that will be available for you. And I hope that everyone will stop outside and enjoy some light refreshments, and of course, spend some time congratulating our colleagues. Thank you very much.